everyone. In this video I'm going to show you all how I create concept art step by step. So for this we'll be creating a concept of a character. This is going to be my front reference image and then my side reference image, because I only need two images to model from. I need the front and the side. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go to File and go to New or Control N. And then I set my pixel size. So if this isn't at pixels already, switch it to pixels. And then I set it to 2048 by 2048. And I set the resolution at 72 pixels per inch. I keep it at 8-bit because it's just concept art. I'm not looking for anything crazy high quality. This works perfectly fine. And then I have my color mode as RGB color. And then I go ahead and just press create. And just in case, my background contents is transparent and pixel aspect ratio, square pixels, just in case any of this is different, you can always double check to make sure they match mine. And then just go ahead and press create. So here is the blank canvas. Close this one because I already have one open here. Same exact settings. So this is my blank canvas, and I want to eventually have something that looks like this. So one of the first things I'm going to do on this layer is I'm going to go to create. This is just going to be my background color. It could just be background color or background, whatever. And the next thing I do is I'll go over here to my tool set, and I'm going to, by default it might be on gradient tool. I'm going to click and hold and go to paint bucket tool. Alright, paint bucket tool. Click, hold, and then release. And you'll notice you have the paint bucket tool. And then I'm going to change the color. I can change it up here under color, and just so you know, I'm in the essentials. It's by default should be set up like this. But a lot of times I use this one over here just because I'm constantly grabbing tools from the side. It's just become kind of a habit. So I always just like click on here and then bring this over. And then my color picker foreground color, whatever you want to call it, comes up, and I can just select and choose a color here and press OK. So I'm going to use white as if it's just a piece of paper. And now I click on it once and it fills the entire canvas up. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer. So this little icon here with the square with the little corner folded over, this is the create new layer button. So go ahead and click that. By default it'll name layer 1 or layer 2 if you haven't changed your the name of your background color here. And in order to change the name is you just double click on the text, and this is going to be what I call my shape sketch. So you can use underscores or spaces, whatever. I sometimes use underscores just as a habit, but you can name it whatever you want using spaces. So anyway, it is a good habit to get into, especially with Maya, because we're going to be doing a lot of naming in the future, and the underscores you have to use because you cannot use spaces. So it's not a bad habit to pick up. Now, under front reference concept image, let me just sort of show you some of the first few steps I take on this. Let me go ahead and hide this stuff, and then I have my shape sketch. So here's my shape sketch, and this is sort of just an overall rough idea of what sort of the silhouette of the character might be, and just kind of break it down step by step. So there's 3 different shapes in here. There's cylinders, spheres, and cubes. That's it. There's nothing else that's fancy in there. There's just 3 shapes: cylinders, spheres, and cubes. So what I'm going to do is over here on my shape sketch, I'm going to go ahead and change my color to black, and I'm going to switch to my brush tool located over here, or keyboard shortcut B. And if you have a drawing tablet, I'm going to cover some things. I know some of you may have drawing tablets, some of you may not, so a couple of these settings I'm about to go over won't matter to you if you're drawing with a mouse. Um, but I'm going to cover it for the people who do have a drawing tablet. So I've got a Wacom Bamboo drawing tablet. Um, just a tip: make sure all your drivers are updated and stuff like that if you notice it's not working properly. But once you have it up and running and you have Photoshop open, there's a few things in here that you can turn on to make your drawing feel a little bit more like you're drawing on paper versus on a computer. So there is the first button here, which is the pressure sensitivity, and what that does, and I'm going to just right click on the canvas and make it a larger brush just so you can sort of see what's happening. And with the pressure sensitivity off, it's always going to be 100% pressure, and it's always going to be the thickness of the line that you made. But if you have pressure sensitivity on, the lighter you draw to the more pressure you add will start to fill that out. So it's a really cool little trick to have. Now there's another button here, and it's the opacity button. And what this does is it really kind of makes it feel a little bit more, because let me turn this off first, the pressure sensitivity. So now with just the opacity on, or pressure opacity, I'm going to slowly start to press harder, and you'll notice that it starts out, slightly opaque, and then picks up and fills in the rest of the color. Now I'll turn a combination of both of them on, so I have my opacity pressure as well as my pressure sensitivity, and now I sort of get this, the lighter I press, the softer and less opaque and stuff like that, or more opaque it becomes. So anyway, I'm going to press Control A for select all. Select all. You'll notice you get the little marching ants going around, and I'm just going to press Delete. So those are some of the tools that I use when I'm drawing. Now, and those few little tools I just showed you, the opacity and the pressure, were just for drawing tablets. Now, a tool that all of us can utilize is the butterfly tool, which is also the symmetry tool. So if you click on this little butterfly up here, and you have to make sure your brush tool is selected, otherwise it'll have different settings up there. So make sure your brush tool is selected. And then I'm going to go to vertical, and then you can press the little check mark here or press enter on the keyboard. And now I'm going to change the brush size to, 20. And this is when I start to sort of sketch out my character. So, the feet, or start with the head, however you want to start. I want to press E for the eraser tool, because it looks like I didn't get something there, or I accidentally pressed on the keyboard. Switch back to my brush tool, and I'll start with just doing the head. I don't know, something like that. And I'm not going for perfection, I'm just kind of, then I draw on these little lines for the location of where I'm going to put the eyes, and this line is always straight down the middle when I'm doing a front reference image. And then the next thing I'm going to do is switch back to my brush tool, is I'll put like a location for the nose, and then a location for the mouth. So there's the head of my shape sketch. After that, I start to sort of branch off. You can draw this in any way, shape, or form. I'm just showing you some of the things that I do. So let's just say you do a neck. I do a little cylinder here for the neck. For the body, I'll do like a square, right? And then for the mid-torso, for the lower torso, and you'll notice I'm running out of space here. Now this is a good time to sort of show you how to expand your canvas if you run into the same issue. So I start with 2048 because I think it's a pretty good size, but if you notice you're like, oh no, then I'll have to redo it, undo it, draw it smaller. You don't have to. You can keep pushing forward instead of taking steps backwards. So what you can do is, from this point, if you need to make your canvas bigger or smaller or whatever at any point, you can go to Image, and go to Canvas Size, image, canvas size, just click on it. And then you'll notice here, in this case, I'm fine with the height. So I'm going to press on the little arrow pointing upwards. And what this shows you is that whatever you change in the width and the height, it's going to expand in these directions, left, down, right, and the angles. So I'm going to change from pixels to percent. I just find it a little bit easier. So if I leave it at 100% and 100%, nothing changes because that's 100% of the canvas size. But if I make the height 150, now I press OK. And since I pressed the anchor on the top, it's going to go straight down. And I can go ahead and press OK. And now you'll notice I have extra room to work with for this character. I may even need extra room for the arms here shortly as well. So I'm going to switch back to my white color. I'm going to switch back to the background color. I'm going to tap G for Paint Bucket Tool. And then click. And eventually what happens, and I still have my symmetry on, but you'll only see it with the brush tool activated. Eventually, you start to make it black. You start to something like that for the. And don't be afraid to erase at all. And now I need to expand the arms a little bit more. Yada yada yada, right? So going back to this, once I have sort of my shape drawn in, it'll look something like this. Okay? Just to save time, right? So the next thing I do once I'm done with my shape is I'll start to do a rough sketch on it. And then what I'll also do is I create a new layer, rename it, and then on my shape sketch I might even bring the opacity down right here. There's a slider if you press the arrow, or you can just literally type in like 50% or whatever. And now on my sketch layer, I'm going to start to sort of fill in a little bit cleaner what this character will look like. And it doesn't need to be perfect yet. And then for the eyes, and then maybe some eyebrows, right? And then maybe some ears. And the nose, I'll typically start right here, and then I'll draw like it coming out, something like that, and then do the lips, something like that. Draw on the eye. Maybe I'll start to include things like the laugh line, maybe some cheekbones. In the previous one, I have some, wrinkles in the forehead. Sort of whatever I'm kind of envisioning, and then I'll just start to come into the body and start to sort of flesh all that out. And then I don't want them to make any really rash adjustments I need to. Edit, redo. And I'll hold spacebar to toggle around, or you can just use these arrow tools, and you can use Control plus and minus. Whoops, Control plus and minus to zoom in and out. And then I might start sketching in. In this case, my guy had like an abdomen, so I'll start to sketch in some of his muscular anatomy. I'll bring this down, start to sort of flesh it out a little bit. I think my guy has like a rib cage coming in here, where he's really sort of malnutritious. I've got the pectorals, right, come up, and then I include like an Adam's apple. some lines for the trapezius here, include the nipple, the arm is good, and then when I'm all said and done with that, I end up with, something like so. In this case, it turned out to be something like this. Then the next thing I do is I create what I call an ink layer. So I'll go and show you just the ink layer, and that's what my character turned out to be. So I'm going to come back over here, and then what I'll do is I'll start to create an ink layer. Right? And I'll go ahead and make this, I don't know, 5 for now. And then I turn off my pressure opacity and my opaque opacity. So it's just 100%, the brush size never changes. And then I can start to sort of, do any sort of adjustments I need to if I see fit. I undid it. His head might be a little odd shaped, so I'll make it, I'll make a jaw here, and a little jaw line. I'll zoom in a little bit, and just start to sort of fill that in. The eye. Something like so, and then the ear I'm just slightly changing, and then I can do that's fine. And then I had the cheekbones in the other one, and a little sunken in face, he's a little malnutritious. And for the eyebrows I could always do something with a thinner brush and just sort of draw that in. This is really just a rough idea. And then I've got the wrinkle in the forehead. That's fine. Right? And I could always go in and erase those little lines that were accidentally drawn in. And I follow this process. Change my brush back to 5. Get a little more clear to see. And just start to do that. Alright, so that's pretty much how I start doing my character. Right? Now, include even more details in the face at least. Do little bags under the eyes. Like so. Turn maybe down the sensitivity on the drawing tablet itself. Just stuff like that, and then where the temple is, maybe I got a little line there. And you could always do hair, right? Doesn't matter. Or a hat if you wanted a hat. But I do want to warn you that adding too many accessories can become more difficult. But I'll also show you how to model hair later also. So here's my character up to this point. I got the ink layer on, and then the next thing I'll do is I will add a color, base color. I'll just grab this color, and I'll create another layer directly underneath my ink layer. Oop. And call this, color or base color, right? And then using my brush tool, I'll zoom in a little bit more, and I'll turn off my sketch layer. And I'm just going to show you how I do the face. I'll come in, this doesn't need to be perfect, and just start to, and you'll notice I still have symmetry on, and you can always, if you're drawing out of the lines or whatever, you can erase and come back and all that kind of good stuff. Then we're going to come down the chin. Alright, so I'll just start with an outline, and then I'll use my fill bucket tool, keyboard shortcut B, and I'll come back, and if I use it twice, it'll fill the whole thing in. Just be careful, it can, if you press the paint bucket tool more than once, you know, if you tap it twice, it will, there is the possibility it'll do things like this. So I'm just going to change the size of my eraser tool and just erase that out. Bada bing, bada boom. So then, once I have my base color on, then I do a layer of highlights. So I'll start doing highlights and shading, or shading and highlights, and start to get it to come to life a little bit more. So the next thing I'll do is I'll create a new layer, and on this layer I'll call it shadows, highlights, you know, the shadows and just the lighting on it in general. You don't have to add color, but just to show you how I do it, I'll right click on the shadows and highlights layer, and I'm going to do create clipping mask. And what that does, I'll switch to gray really quickly and turn my brush size up. What that does, of course not. Oh, I was on the brush tool. I was like, why isn't this working? Turn the brush size up, and you'll see I can draw in this, but even if I'm drawing over here, it doesn't draw anything over there. But if I release this clipping mask, you'll see I drew all over the place. But with the clipping mask on, right click on it, create clipping mask, it'll only cover what the areas that you've done on the previous layer. So it's a really simple, awesome tool. Now, release clipping mask, Control A for select all, delete, and Control D to deselect. Alright, so what I like to do is I typically just use a grayscale on this. I'll start with black. Maybe black and white are the two main colors. So black and white. And what I'll do is I'm going to go to my shadows highlights. I'm going to go to normal. This is the blend mode where it says normal. I'm going to switch this to soft light. And then what I'll do, I'll zoom in a little bit for this, and I'll start to color in some of those areas. And brush size might even be too big. Let's go with like 10. You know, I'll start with something like that. And you know, he's got the little thing in the mouth and here, and the ear is gonna have some shadow in it, right? Under the eyes, have some shadow in it. And then these little wrinkles here, you know, get some shadows on those. This is really, really soft and sensitive. Alright. And then this one. And then I'll switch to this one over here, and you kind of get the idea. And maybe in the eyebrows it's shadowy, right? And then I'll do like a layer of highlights just to show you how I do this. I'll make the brush larger and turn on my brush tool. Maybe I'll turn the hardness down. When I'm doing these, I actually like to keep the hardness all the way at 0. I just didn't double check it. I was just kind of rushing through it, and this way you get sort of these softer edging. It looks a little bit more like natural lighting versus that hard, sharp edge. Anyway, you get the idea. We'll color lips, something like that. And you know, maybe I'll throw in a little bit of white. On the cheekbones, just to accentuate the lighting a little bit, you know, stuff like that. I'll color in the eyes. And what I'll end up with is something like this. So that's pretty much how I go through it to do both front and side concept art. Now, once you're all said and done with, those are just some techniques that I follow. You can do whatever you like. Um, Once I kind of finish that off, I will start to do the side image. And I'm going to show you clothing last. So then I'll do the side image, and what I'll do is the same way I showed you on this. When I'm trying to line this up, I'll go into image. I'll do canvas size, or image, canvas size. I'm going to extend it to the right. So I'm going to click the left button so these arrows are pointing right. I'm going to switch it to percent. And on width, I'm going to change it from 100 to 150 and press OK. And from here, I'll start basically the same process. I'll start to draw on the second character, or the side character, and I'll keep in mind of the rulers and size that I have here, right? And I literally just sort of eyeball it all the way through. But when you're all said and done, I do want you to show these rulers on specific points, such as one at the eyes to make sure it's working right. And I'm going to show you right now. So right here, once all said and done, image, canvas size, we'll go percent, go 150. Oh, and that's what happens when you don't press the anchor. Image, canvas size, press the anchor, change to percent, and we'll do 150. So this way it only pops open this side. And once I have completed, I'll draw it right in the same one. I just have these as separate ones, so for importing reasons into Maya. And then what I'll do, hold on, Control A, Control C, Control V. That's select all. And you'll notice that my character on this one is way different. So in order to change the size of them, I'll press Control T and make him much, much, much smaller. But typically I'll have already drawn him to match the size. And I'm sure if I just do it this way, it'll probably line up pretty well. That's fine. And with my rulers on, I'll go to View, Rulers, or Control R, and that'll turn on rulers and off rulers. And then I'll just use my rulers. I'm going to click and drag on the ruler and start to match things up, like the eyes, the chin. You could even do the lips, right? You could do the top of the forehead. Let's see, the pectorals or the nipples, give or take, but they could be, depending on how you draw it. But in a real photograph, where proportion is basically spot on, you'll notice that you'll have deformation when the arms are out like this. And in my side view, you notice that I don't have an arm in here. And the reason I don't have an arm in there is because I don't need to draw it in. It kind of just gets in the way of hiding some of the details in my side concept art. And then once I'm all said with and done with this, and this is how I want you to submit it, I could go to like the bottom of the shorts, the knees, so on and so forth, and the bottom of the foot. And once I'm all said and done with these, with the ruler, I'm going to take a screenshot of it, or save out the image, or submit the Photoshop file with the rulers on, just displaying this. And then when that's all done, what you can do is you can actually merge all these layers. I'll just show you here because it's just easier. What I'll do is I'll highlight all of these layers except for the background color. What I'll do is I'll create a duplicate by clicking and dragging and highlighting over a new layer. Highlight all these, select one, hold shift, select the bottom one, or you can hold control and select each one of these individually, and then click and drag and duplicate layer. And what I like to do is I just go Control E to merge them all down. So that would be layer, merge down, or Control E. And what I'll do is, just to show you, now I have an exact copy of it. And what I'll do is I will do what I call Control A, Control C. So I'm copying just what's on the copied layer, and then I'll go Control A to select all, Control C to copy, edit copy, and then I'll go File, New. I'll press OK. The clipboard is going to match exactly what you've already copied. So in this case, it's 1238 or 1738 by 1475 pixels. I'll press OK, and then I'll paste it in. And in this case, I actually need to create a background color also. So this would be like my front reference image. Obviously, it would need to be complete, such as this example here, on the left anyway, and also for the right when you're doing the side. And then what you do from here is you'll just file, save scene as, save as, file, save as. You'll name this one like front concept art, right? And change it to a JPEG. And then just go ahead and hit save, and you'll have your submission completed for the front reference image. You're going to follow the same exact process for the side reference image, and then make sure you do it with the ruler. Now I'd like to show you one last thing as far as clothing goes. So I did add clothing to the the front character. I never got around to doing it for the side character, but I did do it just to show you some of the things that you can do with clothing. So I'm going to turn on my clothing folder here and just hide some of this stuff. And I'll show you, I basically go through the same process. I kind of skipped the shape one because, whoops, because I already have it complete. So I kind of just draw these outlined around the body for the clothing. And what I'll do, get these out of the way, is let's just start with the coat. So I got the coat color here, but I'll start with, I really just start these usually just by inking in, because I already know this shape. I already have a rough idea of the sketch. And then I kind of just follow the silhouette of the character. If you can see, just fits it just around that character. And then I'll follow the same thing. I'll do a base color, but the only thing different I do for the clothing is that I added some textures on it. So you'll see I have a layer here called leather texture. And what I'll do is I'll go on to like a website such as textures.com here, and I'll find like, cloth or leather texture, or leather. And you should already have access to this website. If you haven't done it already, please do so, because it is helpful. But you don't have to do any coloration, so this is just a little extra bit of information for future work. So let's just say I really like this one, right? I'll go ahead and download it. You should all know how to create a new account. It's just your email and password once you hit create account if you don't already have one. And then I'll download something like this off the site for leather. And then back here in Photoshop, what I'll do is I'll create a clipping mask, as I did for the shadow and highlights layer on here, the shadow and highlights layer. And what I'll do is I'll turn it onto a soft light or overlay. In this case, I have it set to overlay. You can always try these different blend modes to see which one you like the best. So I'll use overlay on this one, and I'll create a clipping mask on it once I save out that texture file and open it in Photoshop, and then bring it into this image. And then I just overlay the layer. So if I put it on normal, there we go, it would look something like this. But if I switch it to overlay, oh, that's soft light. Overlay, I'll do something like this. And I like to do that to add texture to my clothing. I feel like it really does help me when sort of trying to figure out what I'm kind of modeling in, right? And then I'll do another one for shadow and highlights. And then I also have my vest texture. So anyway, make sure that you get your concept art done. Don't take too much time on it because it is easy to get carried away and kind of get lost up in this project. And then also make sure you submit your front reference image, your side reference image, and your image with rulers on it. So, oh, reference. So when it's all said and done, you can always submit something, whether it's your own drawing or the photograph, something that looks like this with the rulers on as a form of your submission. You can also save this out as a screenshot. Just take a quick screenshot because that that might be easier for you or whatever. But you could also just submit the Photoshop file. That's perfectly acceptable also. Just make sure the rulers are on. So the 3 submission guidelines are front reference image as a JPEG, side reference image as a JPEG, and the rulers. And one of the reasons I can't stress this enough is because having the proper proportions when starting will make modeling so much easier later as you continue working through the course. So anyway, thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions, be sure to let me know. And yeah, thanks for watching.